Dalbin Osorio is the executive director of the Dyslexia Tutoring Program, where he serves as the organization's first BIPOC leader. His leadership is grounded in an explicit equity framework that centers the predominantly Black and Brown communities that DTP serves, building on and transforming the organization's 40-year history. Mr. Rosario brings a deep background in social justice policy, having served as a senior policy advisor with the National Youth Employment Coalition, focusing on housing, workforce development, and justice impacted youth. He is also a former Maryland Education Policy Fellow and has worked closely with Maryland teachers' unions. Before stepping into policy and executive leadership, Mr. Osorio worked directly with young people and families as a preventative and foster care social worker, as well as an ELA and math teacher, experience that shaped his understanding of the systemic barriers students face. At DTP, he champions a strengths-based approach to dyslexia, reframing it as an asset linked to creativity, problem solving, and innovation. He is also advancing new initiatives, including Project Ignite and a proposed tech bootcamp designed to build structured pathways from literacy gains to long-term economic mobility. Welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And as you were reading it, I was like, yeah, I did do that because it's. I think you guys can attest to this at the Student Needs Basic Coalition. There's so much that we do to try to help people that we often forget how much it is that we do because then there's something else to try and tackle as well, right? But I'm super excited to be here and talk with you. I've long admired the work that you guys have done at SBNC, and I'm super excited for this conversation.
Awesome. It's so great to have you. And yes, I could not agree more. Like I could see you like nodding. You're like, oh yeah, I did. I have those moments too. But I'm so excited to talk to you today. I mean, I have to be honest, dyslexia is not something I know too much about, other than kind of
Yeah.
broad level understanding. And so I'm really excited to learn more about this and how we can, advocate for these important issues through this podcast and through community advocacy. So just to start, for listeners who might be hearing about it for the first time, what is the Dyslexia Tutoring Program and what role does it
Yeah.
play in supporting students and families?
That's a great question, and I'll something that you said kind of sticks out to me. This notion that we don't know a lot about dyslexia because I think we, and by we I think the collective, but I also think Black and Brown communities. I think for a very long time, the systems that we've come in contact with have often shunned our concerns around concerns that we may have had around people in our family learning differently, right? And so in turn, if every system that you're coming in contact with is telling you, oh, that's no big deal, oh, that's nothing, oh, don't worry about it if they're struggling with mixing letters or you say one thing and they hear another thing. I think it's very common then for the general knowledge to decrease if folks have constantly told you that there's nothing going on. And so at DTP, what we tried to do, and so as you mentioned in the intro, I am the new executive director. I took over in June, and I'm the first leader of color to lead this organization, the first person of color to lead this organization. And so what we do is we provide rigorous, evidence-based, one-on-one free tutoring to scholars ages 3 to 73, which we have folks who are much older than I am who are receiving this service through free tutoring. That you're not going to get a surprise bill from us 6 months down the line that says, hey, you owe us this much for this, and two, that is very much individualized and is one-on-one. So one of the things that differentiates us from a lot of the other tutoring folks in this space is that you'll have one tutor who's working with maybe 6 or 7 kids at one time or 6 or 7 scholars at one time. For us, it's a one-to-one match. Your tutor is working specifically with you. What that allows for that relationship building, right? That idea that this person is going to work with you until whatever the end goal is, right? And we've had some scholars who receive tutoring for 5 years. We have some scholars who receive it for 10 years. We have some scholars who receive it for 3 months, right? And through that entire time, more often than not, you have that one tutor, right? And so that's huge for the community that we're servicing because it allows for you to build that trust with the person that you're working with, right? And so we have been in existence for over 40 years, but our organization organization was created in order to work with justice impacted youth. And then I think the realization came roughly around 10 years ago that if you are struggling to read, you probably are going to be struggling to do a whole lot of other things too, right? And so we now are trying to champion literacy as almost an economic engine, right? Like if we can work with you earlier, right, and we can address some of the phonemic awareness issues that you may have or some of the decoding issues that you may have, we can then build on ramps to higher standard of living, to higher earning potential in the tech space, in STEM, right, in all these other really high earning industries. And so we view literacy as the great unlocker, the thing that's going to unlock a young person or a adult learner's ability to really earn more money in this economy, so then they can then in turn have a much better standard of living going forward.
Wow, thank you so much for providing a lot of that context. I feel like that is so incredibly important, especially what you mentioned about the one-on-one relationship and the trust building. I find that to be important in my own work as well. I don't know if I mentioned that I do
Yeah.
food systems work in higher ed, and
Yep.
what you say, building that relationship, building that trust is incredibly important for improving outcomes. And it's really nice to see that
Huge.
you all are taking that approach and that focus.
Oh, well, I was
Oh,
gonna say
good.
I love that the food systems work that you guys do because like so for example for me like I grew up low income, right? Like it just I mean really dreadfully below the poverty line, right? I think I didn't realize how far below the poverty line we were until I got older and got into the higher education space, and I saw like my peers who had a lot of things that I just didn't have, right? Like my mom benefited from food stamps, et cetera, et cetera, and the relationships built with the people who didn't judge me for that. I think those are the relationships that have long standed, like have like permeated through my life, right? The folks that very much judged me for that, for like struggling with food insecurity, those are the folks that really didn't last very long in my life. And so I love that because I'm sure that you see that, at SBNC, like this notion of like, if we develop these relationships, we're going to make these really uncomfortable situations much easier to navigate if we're really intentional about how we develop these relationships.
Absolutely. And I know that, representation is a big part of that matter. I know that you're the
Yeah.
first leader of color in DTP's 40-year history, and you bring this explicit equity framework to the organization. How has that shaped the way DTP operates and the way that it serves predominantly Black and Brown communities?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think one of the ways that it shapes how we do this work is we're very intentional about our partnerships, right? So one of the partnerships that we've been working to finalize for a couple months that we were able to finalize this week is a partnership with Morgan State University to be able to train Black and Brown teacher candidates in the world of dyslexia, right? So one of the things that we do whenever we get a new tutor who wants to work with us, we train them for free as well, right? So they go through this 6 week training with us. It's led by trained educators, right? It's our curriculum. We've designed it, right? And we use very affirming language and very strengths-based language. We try to make it as accessible as possible because a lot of the folks that are coming to us either are retired from the education system or have never taught before, right? And they just wanted to do some good. And so even in the developing of our curriculum materials and our micro assessments, we're centering that equity framework that you mentioned. The thing that I always tell people is I can't stop being an Afro Latino just as much as I can't stop breathing, right? Like I walk into these spaces very much who I am. Having said that, I also walk into these spaces with the experience of being the product of a single parent household, right? And walking into these arenas that where folks don't often look like me as the son of an immigrant, as a first generation college graduate, right? And so all of those things make up my identity. Having said that, it's very difficult to then go into a room and be like, you know what? The only thing that matters is how this child does academically. When we know that every one of us are made up of so many different things, right? We are, our gender, our sexuality, our race, our ethnicity. We are all these things. And so I make it a point as we do this work, my staff resembles the folks that we serve, right? Whatever we do in terms of community engagement resembles the staff that the staff and the population that we serve, because the last thing I ever want to do is be extractive to the community we serve, where we come in and we're like, hey, we can help you this way. and then we help you, and then but I've never ever stopped to get to know who you are, and I get what I need from you in this moment, and I never come back. So that's another way that we make sure that we honor that equity framework, is by showing up for the communities that we are asking to entrust us with this service, right? Because we know this, and you know this in your line of work working with food systems. Service is not selfish; it is selfless, right? I am not doing it because I am trying to earn an award or accolades. I am doing it because I believe that this may be a way to help the people that I've been part of those communities too, right? And so, again, it's embedded in our curriculum design. It's embedded in how we recruit tutors. It's embedded in the grants we go after. It's embedded in the partnerships that we explore, because I believe in systems level change. I don't believe in band-aids. I don't believe that I don't believe that we can program our way out of bad policy decisions, but I do believe that we can program our way to empowerment.
Yes, absolutely. I was just taking a moment for it to catch up there with the screen, but
Yeah, no, no,
um,
I got you.
I think that's yeah. But that's one of the things that stands out most to me about DTP and the way that you've described it is this strengths-based approach and the unique approach that you all take to really making this not just a transactional organization, but really, an organization that embeds itself within the communities that it serves. And also, viewing dyslexia through a lens of creativity and problem solving and innovation, as was mentioned. We mentioned that it is important, but why is it important, and how does it change the trajectory for learners who then see themselves through these lenses?
Yeah, big time, right? I think what you run the risk of doing if you don't view the way somebody learns as a strength is, you run the risk of turning them off to any and all forms of education. And keep in mind, when I say education, I'm not just talking about being in school, right? I'm talking about like the education that comes in the form of mentoring, the education that comes in the form of social capital building, right? Like this idea that we're always learning, right? And with SBNCs and your focus on higher education, there's that part as well, right? If I can help a young person feel valued in the education system, they are more likely to go on to higher education. And the way the system is set up now, and this is why the work that SBNC does is so important, the way the system is set up now, you are more likely to be successful if you go to higher education. You are. It's just the way the system is set up now. So what are we doing to build the bridges between primary education, secondary education, leading into higher education? So that way you're feeling valued the entire way through. That way folks are seeing your true humanity and not just this, oh, well, this is a kid from West Baltimore. I know what that's like, right? Like I grew up in the Bronx, right? So I very much knew what people thought I was, right? The minute I walked into a higher education space, I knew that folks were like, well, he's not going to make it, right? And so I have very fond memories of going back to professors who made those aspersions and saying like, "Hey, I'm a year away from finishing my doctorate, so I made it." But it's also letting folks know that if you don't aspire to higher education, that doesn't mean you didn't make it, right? Like maybe we get you into a space where you're making really good money and you're able to take care of your family and you're not going hungry, right? Because I think that's the crux of this work that we do in this human services space is, are we making sure people are fed and are we making sure people are happy? If we can do that, I think the rest will kind of take care of itself. And so as we reframe dyslexia and we do reframe it into this strengths-based approach where there's nothing wrong with you, where it's like, hey, you just learn a little bit differently, and if we can twist the way we teach our young people, then I think it becomes, you learn just like everybody else, right? Like you just need a little bit more help, or we need to work with you a little bit more one-on-one, because I think we lose our young people the minute we try to make them fit our expectation of them. Right? And the minute we sit there and we're like, it needs to look the way I need it to look, I think we lose young people. And so for DTP, we try to shift that. We try to turn that on its head. I don't need it to look the way I need it to look. I need it to look the way it works for you, because then I can get you where you want to go, right? I can get you to a higher education space. I can get you to get a bachelor's, an associate's, a master's, a doctor. I can do all that, right? But if I'm not catering if I'm not designing the bridge with you, right, then ultimately what am I doing? I'm just shutting you out, and that's not the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, hearing you describe this in more depth is just so refreshing because I feel like still, I don't know if this is just a personal opinion, but I still feel like a lot of the work when it comes to basic needs and human services, like you mentioned, it's always framed from or approached from this position of lack or focusing on what needs to be fixed or improved. But it's for me, I'm just maybe like a natural optimist, but it's always been more natural for me to, like you said, see the strengths in things or see the ways that food access and educational justice can bring people together and really hone in on those strengths.
Big
So
time.
it's just so great to hear an organization that is actually doing this in real time because I still feel like there's such, a focus on what needs to be fixed instead of, these are valuable people
Big
with
time.
strengths. How can we
Well,
hone on that?
Well, and I love how you just framed it too, right? Like that, like this inherent need to place value on what I can fix for you, right? Like this belief that like you only have value if I fixed it my way, and so I think that that's a disingenuous way to view this work, right? I'm a firm believer in you don't build higher walls, you build longer tables, right? And the table may look differently. The table may look differently for somebody struggling with food insecurity. The table may look differently for somebody struggling with access to education, access to broadband, all these things. The table may look differently. Doesn't mean you stop building the table. We just keep adding. My mom used to have this thing, and I remember like now that I'm 40, I'm like, oh, there were a lot of gems that my mom dropped. But when I was in my 20s, I was like, man, this woman is crazy. She's not giving me anything. But my mom used to say whenever we'd have people over, she's like, you just add another chair, right? You just add another chair. It doesn't matter how this person showed up. It just matters that they showed up, right? And that's, I think, something that we
Mm.
try to bring into this work. And it's something that, again, I've long admired about SBNC because you guys are in these higher education spaces. The kids, the scholars that you're interacting with got to these spaces very differently, right? Very few of them are legacy admissions. Very few of them, their daddy bought a wing in the school and they were able to kind of coast through, right? And we know this, right? Because we know this from personal experience and lived experience and all that. Poverty is not biased to folks who are in low income communities, right? Like it'll find us regardless, right? And we'll know what it's like to struggle to have a meal. We'll know what it's like to go through these things, to struggle with our mental health, right? All these things. And so we have to build a longer table that makes sure that so that way we can meet folks where they are. And so that's, again, like, you're spot on. And in the nonprofit space, I will say there is a lot of pushback, I think, because folks are used to doing things a certain way. So when an organization like SBNC comes around, or when an organization comes around like you guys, because, right, like, you guys are newer than we are, or an organization like ours who's an older organization but tries to do things differently, there's so much pushback and gatekeeping. No, you can't do it that way. And it's especially true when you're led by younger folks, right? Which I'm sure, again, you guys can attest to this. Both of your founders are under 30 years old. I think they just turned 30. Like, it's very different to be in this space and have folks who say to you, well, you should really wait your turn. That problem can wait. We know what we're doing. And it's like, no, if it had been solved before, we wouldn't be here. SBNC wouldn't exist if food insecurity had been solved, or maybe it exists in a different format. And so that's something that I, as again, a fellow young person, and that makes me feel real old saying that, like, how do you do, fellow young people? But I also just turned 40, right? Like, I also just turned 40. I'm very keenly aware of what my generation has gone through, and I feel the sense of urgency to meet this moment now, and we have to meet it in a way that honors people's humanity, not the other way around.
Speaking of meeting the moment, I know under your leadership, DTP is expanding into new initiatives like Project Ignite and a potential tech boot camp. What needs or gaps did you see that led to the development of these programs, and what impact do you think they'll have long term?
Yeah, I love that question, Taylor. So for me, I think the reason why we ended up developing those ideas and a bunch of the other ideas that we're having is because, particularly with neurodivergence, it is a population that is often ignored in the conversation whenever we talk about economic mobility. It is very much well, we'll eventually get to that, and if we solve all of this, it'll eventually impact folks with neurodivergence, and we think that that's inaccurate. We think that there is a load of potential in that population if we just build the on ramps to the economy that we really should be building, right? And so, for example, a person who is neurodivergent, a person who has dyslexia, their brain is already wired to be more successful in the STEM field or in the tech field than, a person that maybe doesn't learn that way, right? And so for us, we saw the gap particularly in Baltimore, but for us, our goal is to expand fully across the state. We've seen the gap economically in the fact that post-pandemic, the economy has lost a bunch of workers, right? People passed away during the pandemic. It was very traumatic. We lost people from our workforce and never were able to replace them. People also during the pandemic realized they didn't want to struggle anymore, right? They didn't want to get to the point where they were working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and bleeding themselves dry for organizations that didn't value them as people, right? So they left the economy and went to go do different things. They went to go parasailing and write a book and all these things that feed your soul, because working a 9 to 5, nobody, folks, and my mom said this. She's like, "Oh, isn't it great that you're at your dream job?" And I said to her, "I said, Mom, I didn't dream to work. That wasn't a dream that I had, right? My dream was to be on a beach somewhere, just chilling and not doing any of that." Having said that, the work is necessary. But in this space, I very much acknowledge that the neurodivergent talent pool gets exploited and ignored very, very often. And so DTP is trying to be the great middle person, the mediator, the bridge builder to the economy for this population, because there's talent there that could ensure the economic sustainability of the state and of the country, realistically, if we build these on ramps for them to be able to get micro credentials, for them to be able to have access to higher earning potential careers. And so those were some of the gaps that we saw, that I was like, wait, there's got to be a way to build these with partnerships with different organizations like Opportunity at Work, like SBNC, right, that are doing a lot of this work on the ground. Can we build those on ramps to make sure that our scholars can really access these higher earning potential careers? And then to the second part of your question, where we see the long-term potential is that we see a world where everybody who learns differently has a chance to earn differently, right? And the right now in Baltimore, we estimate that there is approximately around 40,000 young people who do not have a formal diagnosis of dyslexia, who struggle with literacy. That is 40,000 potential employees in the state of Baltimore, in the city of Baltimore, in the state of Maryland, who do not have a formal diagnosis, and therefore you don't know that they learn differently. So if we were able to get them screened and get them evaluated and get them an official diagnosis, then we can start to really look at, okay, well, they learn this way. Let's create social capital incubators for folks who have dyslexia who can really do really good work in finance, for example, right? Or let's create these tech hubs, for example. That one of the ideas that we're exploring now, where we are partnering with an organization like Empower in Baltimore to create micro credentialed internships for young folks who have dyslexia at tech companies, so they can be the ones that are designing large language models with the influx of AI, right? So there's a lot of potential there to really, again, backfill a lot of the talent that we lost post-pandemic, but also create an economy that works for everybody. And so that's, I think, the long-term potential if we do this right, and if we do this in a way that really ensures that we've brought young people to the table to design these initiatives with us.
You know, my last question for you today is, really zooming out. I always like to kind of leave things on a more optimistic note. So, you've worked across policy, direct service, and
Yeah.
education, from social work to national youth advocacy. So, what through line connects all of these roles for you? And how do your collective experiences, shape the way that you lead DTP today and hope to continue to lead DTP?
Yeah, no, I love that question, and I love how optimistic you are, because I too am a natural optimist. Like I would hate I would hate to go into this work thinking that we're never going to solve these really big these really big issues that are facing us, right? And so through that all, I do remain optimistic that if we continue to chop at the tree, right? And I use the parable of the tree in the ocean. The ocean crashes over it 99 times, 100 times, 101 times, and it still doesn't break. But then on the 102nd time, the wave crashes on it and the tree tumbles over. And that doesn't negate the 101 crashes before it, right? And so I very much stand on the shoulders of the people who are doing this work before me. And I think in turn, because I stand on those shoulders, I feel the sense of urgency that I mentioned it before. So having said that, I think the through line for me is, are we making things better today? Are we making things more? Are we improving things today more than they were yesterday? And are we doing it the day before? Because I believe that if we stack enough good days, right, and make no mistake about it, we're in a turbulent time where there aren't many good days. But if we can stack that, we can stack many good days for people, for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, right? For our non-binary folks, our younger folks who don't have access to early childhood education, our retired folks who aren't able to make ends meet with their retirement, with the money that they put away for their retirement. Their Social Security doesn't give them enough. For the folks who are struggling under medical debt, the folks that are struggling through food insecurity, for the folks that are struggling with mental health concerns, right? I firmly believe that despite all the negativity in the world, there are more of us who believe that nobody should go hungry than there are more of us who believe people should go hungry. I believe that there's more of us who very much think that no kid should be made to stay incarcerated, and that more of us believe in diversion programs, right? And in being able to connect folks to mentoring, right? And instead of supervision, because mentoring is really the key. And so the through way for me is, do I find enough people like that believe that, right? Like yourself, like Paige, like the folks at SBNC, like the folks at a lot of these other really great organizations that are doing this work nationally. Can we find enough of those to really continue to make things better every day? And I believe if we do that, I think we'll be okay. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. When I was 18, the very first protest that I went to was protesting education budget cuts in New York, right? That was when I was 18. That was 22 years ago. My daughter, when we went to parent teacher conference, her teacher was sharing how she may have to look elsewhere, just because, like, the state of Maryland, for a long, she may have had to go elsewhere because the state of Maryland was not paying our teachers what they were worth for a really long time. Some of the work that I did with the teachers unions that you mentioned in my introduction was to increase the pay rate for teachers. And, we found out this week that we have been able to decrease the teacher vacancy rate in Maryland down to 53%. That is the lowest it's been in the last 20 years. And in turn, that's in part because of the work that folks have done to make sure that our educators are paid what they're worth. So we stacked enough good days to where we've made that a reality, right? We've stacked enough good days in food insecurity to where maybe we decrease the hunger issue in school systems and beyond. Maybe we keep stacking enough good days. So that's the through way. My belief is that if we stack enough good days, I believe we will be okay. And my 7-year-old daughter won't have to solve the stuff that I was trying to solve 22 years ago. So find enough good people that row in the same direction as you and continue to stack the good days, and I think we'll be okay.
I think that is a beautiful place to leave off. Mr. Osorio, thank you so much for joining me and sharing the work that you're doing with the Dyslexia Tutoring Program. Uh, you know, your vision for equity and strengths-based learning, and just long-term opportunity is both seen and felt, and I'm grateful that you took the time to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you.
I'm great. No, thank you. And again, big shout out to you and the whole team at SBNC. You guys are doing such amazing work, particularly in the face of very much a changing landscape from when you guys started. So really kudos to your entire team. I'm actively rooting for all of you. And I couldn't be more grateful to have had this conversation with you, Taylor. Thank you so much.
Well, everyone, that wraps up this week's episode of the Student Impact Report. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at SBNC_USA, and you can catch our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. See you next time.